Hey guys, if you've stuck with me this whole time, you might recognize this format. It was my first video, which still to date has the most views out of any of the ones that I've posted so far. And once again, I'm doing a countdown. You'll already notice by the title what it's about. I was just itching to do a video, and I was just thinking something interesting that I could do, something different. Well, not very different, but something different than the format that I've been doing, where I just hold the phone in front of my face and just tell you about stuff that I'm interested in or talk about Iron Fist. And so today I want to count down what I personally believe are the top 10 greatest comic book movies of all time. I considered everything that I'd seen when I did this. I considered all the Batman movies, all the Superman movies, all the Spider-Man movies, all the X-Men movies, the MCU, even glanced at the DCEU. um, and I compiled a list from all of that, put it in the top 10. And I will say, determining the top 10 wasn't super hard. Determining what the 10 would be wasn't super hard. Once I had that, placing these was actually really difficult. I felt very confident about number 10, about number 1, everything in between. I was like, I guess I'll put this here. Uh, so bear with me. I think I should preface this with uh, just the knowledge that I have unfortunately not seen, well, Batman Forever, Batman and Robin, although I doubt from what I've heard about those movies they would have made this. I might watch those at some point just because I might want to do a top 10 worst. um, I have also not seen the Blade movies. I've heard those are really great films. Well, those are very controversial. Some people believe them to be really great. Some people believe them to be really terrible, and you have to have a certain mindset. I would love to watch those someday, but I have not seen them as of now. And also, I have not seen the very recently released Logan, which is getting a lot of attention. And just from what I've heard of it and the trailers and all that, I almost just want to put this as an honorary spot somewhere on this list. But I cannot do that physically, actually put it in here because I've not seen it, so I cannot say for sure whether or not I like it as much as I hope I'm going to. So without further ado, I guess let's jump right in this. Uh, there are a few MCU movies on here, obviously. Uh, they're not all placed anywhere near in the same place. Well, like they're some of them are higher or lower than they are in my MCU countdown. And a big part of that is because the criteria I was looking for in this was a little different than that. With that, I was just saying which of the MCU movies entertain me the most. This, I'm putting my own entertainment into there, but I'm also thinking what subverted the genre, what broke new ground, what did something new and different and interesting. And so that's what I'm looking for a lot on here more than anything else. There are some other criteria in here, but that's the biggest thing, and that's the biggest reason why some of the things from my MCU countdown will be drastically different in here. So, I'll start with number 10. Number 10, I don't think any list is really quite complete without this. As much as I'm not the biggest fan of this movie, I can't deny the incredible things it did. It was the first of its kind. Nobody'd seen anything like this before, and that is the 1978 Superman. That movie, for the time that it came out especially, was incredible. Uh, it brought Superman to life. It brought the first real, like, comic book superhero to life on the big screen for people to look at. You got to see a man fly. You got to see uh you got to see Christopher Reeve's first performance in that role, taking on that iconic costume. And this, I had to put this on here because it really is the reason that we have comic book movies. if this didn't do well, nobody ever would have looked at comic book movies again. Obviously, they did go through a rut after this, but if this hadn't done well, I don't think anybody would have ever really thought too much about adapting them, at least not for a very long time, and we wouldn't have had a lot of the other stuff on this list. It is the bottom of my top 10, just because, in my opinion, it really doesn't hold up to the test of time. Obviously, with the effects, which were great for their time, but not so much now. And some of the cheesy acting, some of the cheesy plot lines. Oh, and I'm sorry, I could not put it above 10 if nothing else, just for the plot thread where he spins the earth backwards and reverses time. No. Sorry. It's got to be number 10, but I really do think it's deserving of that spot at number 10. Number 9 surprised me. I actually changed some things around last minute for number 9. I really just thought that it deserved to be on here. Number 9 is X-Men First Class. Now, the main reason I put this on here is just because it's the only X-Men movie that's great, in my opinion. I mean, there's others. A lot of people rave about X-Men and X2. They're decent movies. They're not anything amazing. I suppose they came first in the 21st century renaissance of comic book movies, but they didn't really light the match on that. That came a few years later. And they weren't anything super new and interesting. I mean, they brought the X-Men to life. Hugh Jackman as Wolverine obviously is great. Patrick Stewart as Professor X, and all that started. But they weren't fantastic movies on their own, really, aside from the fact that they brought these icons to live action. X-Men First Class was such an interesting story about Charles Xavier, and how he came to be who he was, and what his dynamic with Magneto and the whole team there. There's great performances from everybody, and there's very good character tensions and things and all that. And that movie, that's the only time they got it right. That's the only time they got those characters, all of them, right. Perfect. Because before that, yeah, X-Men and X2 were decent. And then, obviously, X-Men The Last Stand happened. And then, X-Men Origins, we're all lucky that didn't dig X-Men's grave there. And then X-Men First Class came out, and that was great, and that was a fantastic movie. And then, it was followed up by The Wolverine, and then Days of Future Past was good, I guess, but there was full of plot holes, and it really wasn't as fantastic as a lot of people tried to say it was. And then, X-Men Apocalypse after that. Anyway, X-Men First Class, I think, is the number 9 best comic book movie of all time. Moving right along here. So after this, it got really tricky to place everything. So just note that a lot of these could have been in almost any order. But I had to say number 8 for me is Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins. You thought I was going to say The Dark Knight. I would not put that at number 8, don't worry. Batman Begins is probably the best Batman origin adaptation from the comics that we have seen, I think. This is something, it put Batman in the real world in a very interesting and very believable way, honestly. There's very little here that, obviously, there's some suspension of disbelief, but there's very little here that feels like it couldn't have actually happened in the real world. It makes you really believe that Bruce Wayne can be a real person who actually dresses as a bat in the middle of the night and fights crime. And it does it in a really interesting way. it brought the Scarecrow to life, and the Scarecrow is terrifying. I mean, in the comics or cartoons already, and then is much more terrifying when you see him in live action in this movie. Um, and they really brought Ra's al Ghul and the League of Shadows things into a real world thing. Once again, such a it's a weird concept, but it really made you feel like this could be happening, and that's something that's so hard to do that they did so well somehow. And that's I can't discredit it for that. Batman Begins has got to be number 8. Batman Begins is a great origin story. Number 7. See, I almost want to say number 7. I have to say probably deserves to be at number 8 or maybe even number 9. But it just affected me so much, I had to just bump it up at least a little bit. Even if I know it's not that wonderful of a movie standing on its own, especially because it's so far into a franchise. But it came out in 2016 even. Captain America Civil War. What a great movie. What a great comic book film. What a great superhero film. It managed to balance 12 different lead characters. 2 of them are arguably not lead characters, but I mean, they have their arcs in that movie, though. It delivered the best fight sequence in a superhero movie thus far in history. Without a doubt. Anybody who tries to argue that is kidding themselves. That airport sequence was incredible. But it really delivered on these character moments and this building tension over 13 movies between these groups. And this group that finally just divides, and the twist, obviously, with... I guess I won't spoil it if you really haven't seen it, because I'm not going to label this spoilers, but with who killed Iron Man's dad, Iron Man's parents, and all that, and just what it did to just the entire MCU, just taking things in a new direction, taking a formula that the MCU had developed that was very lighthearted and fun, and making it darker and making it feel more real, and pushing things to their limit. I gotta give it credit. It definitely needs to be on this list, and I put it up a little higher than it may deserve just because it's one of my favorite comic book movies of all time, and man, Captain America Civil War, number 7. Number 6, this is another one I wanted to put higher, but I really love the movies above it. I think they just stand so well as movies. Number 6 is a movie that came out of left field, that nobody expected to be as crazy and different and awesome, and well acted, written, etc. as it was. Spun out of the X-Men franchise, but it's completely its own thing, and of course you all now know what I'm talking about. Number 6 for me had to be Deadpool. Deadpool proved that you could have you could make a raunchy R-rated comedy out of a superhero film and still have it be a superhero film. It's one of the ultimate examples of making a satire of something while also making that thing. And it's just meta humor, and obviously they nailed Deadpool's character and his fourth wall breaking, his chimichangas, his just absolute insanity, and it all works so well in this film. The low budget even helped it out, and there's so many creative scenes because of that. And I mean, this is a movie that was on such a low budget and then made so much money back because of that. I believe it's the highest grossing R-rated film of all time now. And that's insane. Deadpool, way to go. Have to put it up there. Number 6, I would have put it higher if it weren't for how amazing I believe these next 5 movies are. So that was 10 through 6. Now we go 5 through 1, so bottom half, and we're moving into the top 5 best comic book movies of all time. Via my opinion, of course. If you strongly disagree with some of these, that's fine. There's so many out there now, which is a great thing, and so I totally understand how you could have a bunch that aren't on here that are very dear to your heart. But anyway, moving along. Number 5. This one is one I'm afraid I'm going to get shot for putting at number 5, because I can definitely see why so many people would think it deserves to be higher. And honestly, I think it does too, in a way, but I just love them. The movies above it are so great too, and so it's just like I felt like I had no choice but to put it down here. But I wanted all 5 of these at number 1. Number 5 for me is Iron Man. Where do I begin with Iron Man? Obviously, it kicked off the MCU, the first ever ultimate shared universe in movies, aside from the monster movies in the 30s, and it built a world for the MCU to stand on, and that in itself is an incredible feat. But aside from that entirely, it's such a good movie. It's one of the best Phoenix metaphors put to film, I believe. Honestly, I mean, you got a story about a billionaire who makes weapons and is cocky and arrogant, and he's an alcoholic and a playboy, and then he is captured by terrorists, put in a cave, forced to make a metal suit to get him out of it, and then sees them use his own weapons against him, shuts down his weapons factory, and becomes a superhero. If you've never seen Iron Man, which it's been 10 years, if you haven't seen Iron Man, go watch it right now. You're crazy. What are you doing even watching this countdown if you haven't watched Iron Man? But if you haven't seen Iron Man and you heard that, does that not already just make you want to go watch that? That is such a killer premise, and then it's executed amazingly. Robert Downey Jr. kills it as Tony Stark. This movie and everyone forward that he's in, honestly. The direction is great. The writing is great. The acting is great. The fights are great. The special effects are awesome. There's a scene where he shoots a missile and then walks away from an explosion, just like any good action movie should have. Iron Man, honestly, along with the next 4, deserves to be at number 1. But unfortunately, I have to place them all somewhere, and is the number 5 best comic book movie of all time. Moving forward, number 4. Man, do I want this to be number 1, but I want this to be number 1, but it can't be. It just can't be. Because of the ones that above it just really deserve their place. This is my number 1. This is my number 1 in the MCU. And so if you watch that video, you know what I'm about to say. Number 4 for me is The Avengers. So obviously I want this to be higher up. It kills me to put it at number 4, but just say why it is as high as it is. The Avengers obviously is the first movie to bring together these different franchises into one super franchise in the way that it did. This was the first culmination of Kevin Feige's plan, saying, hey, all these superheroes have their own comic book storylines and then they come together in the comics. Why can't we do that in a movie? And he did it in a movie, and it was great. It was directed by Joss Whedon, and Joss Whedon was the perfect person to pick for this. Just if you've seen a lot of his stuff, Firefly or Cabin in the Woods, a lot of ensemble type things he does very well with. He takes a bunch of different characters, makes them all relevant, and then makes a great, compelling story with great concepts. It does it very well, and he does that in this movie. He took characters that were all already in this universe. He didn't get to write them for the first time. He had to stick to their personalities and to the characters that were already established in past movies. And then he had to bring them all together and anyway, he had to bring them all together and give a believable plot that worked, especially based on like the studio already having straps on him on what he couldn't do, and he made it work well. He made it an enjoyable movie about a team coming together, and it was the first time that we saw Iron Man and Captain America, the Hulk, Thor, all together on screen together. With Black Widow and Hawkeye fighting Loki, and that's the thing, is it had these characters that you already knew to play off of, and nothing had ever had that before in comic books or any movies like that had brought these different franchises in and just meshed them so well. It's such a great blend. It's such a beautiful movie. I've talked too long about the Avengers, but the Avengers is the number 4 best comic book movie of all time. Moving along still. Number 3. This one, I had a hard time picking between this and its predecessor. And I want to give love to its sequel that everybody absolutely hates and I think is a great movie with one bad casting choice, and everybody despises it because of that. But Spider-Man 3, I think, is a good movie with a bad casting choice. Everybody hates it. Spider-Man is a better movie. Spider-Man 2 is a fantastic movie, and I would even go as far to say it is the number 3 best comic book movie of all time. Spider-Man 2, Sam Raimi was honestly the perfect person to handle Spider-Man, or really any like fun, crazy, like quippy comic book movie. He gives this movie such a fun, enjoyable style. He makes it feel like you're reading a comic book on the screen. With the way that he edits things together, cuts one thing to the next in different transitions, and his over the top yet still very somehow over the top and also very down to earth real characters at the same time, and make it feel like you're watching a comic book but you're watching a movie and you don't know which, and it's beautiful. And then you got, the character of Peter Parker and Spider-Man and what drives him and all that nailed perfectly in here, with the metaphor where he's losing his powers and he has to believe in himself and get them back. And then the great villain, the Doc Ock, brought to life, one of the first Spider-Man villains ever shown in the comics, brought to life in such a beautiful way here, and pitted against Spider-Man in a way where you really feel for both of them. And then, of course, the great performances just by the secondary characters, the Mary Jane and Harry Osborn, and building them up in a way that I think culminated well in Spider-Man 3. But everybody hates that one, so I'll stop talking about it. I'm sure you're already angry about it. Anyway, but, I mean... and I love Spider-Man also. It was hard for me to pick, but... I do understand absolutely why people love this one and why so many other people call this one of the best comic book movies of all time. Some people have it at their number 1, and I get that. Spider-Man 2, in my opinion, is the 3rd best comic book movie of all time. Once again, moving forward. Number 2. This one, I surprised myself with, honestly. But when I was thinking about the criteria, and I was like, what pops? What comic book movie just is crazy and different and incredible and well directed and acted, and it has its own style, has its own voice, subverts the genre. It doesn't just feel like a great comic book movie, but a great movie that you love to watch and you want to watch again and again. And nothing, I mean nothing, screams that louder to me than Guardians of the Galaxy. Guardians of the Galaxy is such a different movie. It's a space adventure with a guy who listens to 80s music on a Walkman, uh, with a green assassin and a wrestler dude from another world who likes to break people's bones and doesn't understand sarcasm, a talking raccoon, and a walking tree. What? How does that work? It does. Very, very well, in fact. You love these characters. You want to spend time with them. You love how they're thrown together and they're this ragtag team, and they're funny and they're interesting and they have heart and they each have a reason for why they're doing what they're doing. And beneath the comedy, there's very real characters to each of them, and you care about them. You want to see them succeed. They put an Infinity Stone in here. And made a really interesting plot that tied in with the MCU, but you didn't need to care about that. You could, I know plenty of people who don't follow the MCU at all and just watch this movie and love it, and it's one of their favorite movies. And if that doesn't attest to it being as high as it is, I don't know what does. Because that's the biggest thing about this, is what is just a great movie. Not just a great comic book movie, but a great movie. Subverts the genre, or overcomes the genre even, and just feels like a great movie on its own that comic book lovers and non-comic book lovers alike can love as a movie. So, Guardians of the Galaxy #2. Now, before I move on to #1, I wanted to give some honorable mentions, and I want to see if I can still remember what they are. Well, I feel like I talked about some of them is the biggest issue. Because I wanted to give an honorable mention to the original Spider-Man. I thought that's a wonderful movie that I think deserves some love, for sure. The original Spider-Man. I'll just look on my list here because I have a list of so many different comic book movies that I just wanted to consider at least. Oh, The Dark Knight Rises is a wonderful movie as well. Doesn't really deserve a spot on this list just quite, I think, just because of some of its plot holes and stuff. I might have actually had it at like #11, though. I think it's a great movie. Worth watching, absolutely. I love Spider-Man 3, too. You can all... Spider-Man 3, if you look past the fact that they totally butchered Venom, which is one of the best comic book villains of all time, and so I totally understand why that alone is enough to piss a lot of people off. I get it. But if you just look past that part, look at the rest of the movie, how it functions, how the characters develop, it's a great movie. It just is. It does not deserve to be on the top 10. I will admit that. It absolutely does not, but it's an awesome movie, and you should go watch it and give it a chance. Anyway, #1 for me, well, see if I can edit that out. I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to put it, well, I did, because I was confident about it from the beginning, but I mean, like, I want Guardians of the Galaxy to be #1. I want Spider-Man 2 to be #1. I want the Avengers to be #1. I want Iron Man to be #1. I want any of those to be #1 because I love these characters so much and they're so fun. But if I'm honest with myself, there is one film that absolutely is critically acclaimed, loved by all, and doesn't feel like a superhero film. That feels like so much more and has so much more to say than any superhero film does. The best comic book movie of all time, I can't lie, has to be, without any doubt, The Dark Knight. The Dark Knight is the best portrayal we have ever seen, honestly, of Batman and the Joker. And I mean that, and everybody says it's the Heath Ledger show, and don't get me wrong, he's definitely the best thing in that movie by far, but the way Heath Ledger and Christian Bale play off each other as the Joker and the Batman in that movie is like nothing I've ever seen. They perfectly represent them as two sides of the same coin. And it's very true when you think about it. Batman is to the underworld what Joker is to the public. He's a man who came from nowhere, has a whole bunch of seemingly endless gadgets, and just decided that he wanted to change the way things are done. That's exactly what the Joker is too. And it's so masterfully crafted as a movie with the plots and the twists, and all the just little moments. All the little moments about that movie are just what I think about that are so incredible. The I'm gonna make this pencil disappear thing, the I want to know how I got these scars, and the fact that he gives a different story every time, that it's none of them are true, and you never know how he got the scars. It's not important. He's never going to tell you he's a psychopath. The moment where showing Batman having just as much character flaw as the Joker almost in some ways, even if he's not as sick and twisted. The fact that when he's coming on the bike and the hit me, I want you to do it, hit me, like this. It's incredible. The performances and the writing is incredible in that movie. It is, I would put this at least in the top 10 films of all time. Like, honestly. And so to not put it at number 1 in the top 10 comic book movies of all time, when I would definitely not put any of these other ones in the top 10 films of all time, is just unfair. The Dark Knight is the best comic book movie of all time. Thank you guys for indulging me with that little rant. Let me know if you guys like these countdowns, if that's what you want to see me do more, or what you want to see me do more. I don't generally get a lot of comments on these videos, and I mean, I can't blame you, because I can't honestly say that I comment on videos even that I love very often anyway. So I definitely get that. But if it's not too much trouble for you, I really like it if you can leave me comments, give me feedback. Let me know what you want to see, let me know what you like, let me know what you don't like, and stay tuned. I will get on that Star Wars video sooner or later. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to do, but I just had a sudden thing where I was like, I want to do a top 10 list of comic book movies. I'm going to do that. It's actually like 2 a.m. almost right now, while I'm filming this, and I'll probably post it shortly after, and then share it again in the morning, so that you'll see it if you're, not nocturnal. Anyway, with that, I will leave you guys, and I will see you with another video.